From Brussels to Brasilia, from San Francisco to Tokyo, the European Commission is shaping the digital future, not just at home, but across the globe. Join us as we navigate the digital diplomacy of tomorrow, because everything we do is part of something bigger.
Good morning, everybody, and a warm welcome to this session of the Connect University dedicated to connecting the world and focusing on the role of the International Telecommunication Union and on the cooperation that the European Commission has long established with ITU. My name is Beatrice Covassi. I work as senior expert in DG Connect. I coordinate ITU work here, and I will lead you through this session of this morning. As you may know, the ITU is the oldest UN specialized agency. It started in 1865, and it was established first as the International Telegraph Union. And it does set global norms and standards in telecommunications. But of course, telecommunications and electronic communications has become a very evolving concept, let's say, and the expert will help you deep dive in how ITU has evolved over the years. ITU work has focuses on three sectors: radio spectrum, and standardization and development. And we will hear from experts, especially on the spectrum and the standardization sectors. And now what matters, and that's why also we are happy to have this session today, is that the role of the ITU has become increasingly important in a geopolitical context where ICT and digital transformation are becoming tools for global influence, for global power. So it is a role which has been increasing over the years, and our cooperation has been increasing also over the years with them. I am happy to be joined this morning by our Deputy Director General, Renate Nicolai, and by Jaroslav Ponder, who is the head of the regional office of the ITU for Europe. And they will give us a sense of his evolution and of his role and of the importance of the challenges that we are facing today. We will then deep dive into standards together with Emilio Davila Gonzalez, who is the head of the Sector for Standardization Policy, and Martin Brinskov from SSC, Smart Cities, so how this impacts in real life. And then we will continue with radio spectrum policy, which is a very exciting topic, together with the head of the radio spectrum unit, Erasmus Sofianatos. You will be able to send questions through Slido, and to have some questions at the end of each session. So this is all from my side. No further ado, I will be very happy to leave the floor to the Deputy Director General of DG Connect, Renate Nicolai, to give us the overview, the big vision about current challenges and what's lying ahead. Renate, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Beatrice, and good morning, everybody, to this kind of Connect University session on the International Telecommunication Union, the ITU, which, as Beatrice has said, is a very important global player in the digital kind of context. I'm very happy that we are also accompanied today by a representative of the ITU. A pity that the Secretary General, Doreen Bogdan Martin, who wanted to be with us, has been delayed because of a flight connection problem. My greetings to her, but it's great that we have somebody from the ITU with us to kind of, share the thoughts, for the audience. For us in the European Commission, the ITU is indeed an important partner when it comes to our spectrum negotiations, when it comes to global standard settings, but also to kind of, making sure there is digital development across the globe and nobody is left behind. The ITU is a place, and this is not to be underestimated in today's global world, where people come together, where we promote the development of a global vision on telecommunication and ICT technologies, infrastructures and services. And we in the European Commission have really kind of, participated at relevant ITU bodies and strengthened over the years our kind of, cooperation with that international organization in the service of kind of shaping global and norms and initiatives. And we very often do this not alone, but we do it very hand in hand with the member states experts in a sort of a Team Europe approach to kind of benefit and build on the best expertise that we have, of course, partly, luckily, in our teams here in Brussels, but also across the European Union in the rich kind of, talents amongst our 27 member states. Especially in today's time, where we are in a very kind of, dynamic digital transition, in a very kind of disruptive technological development, but also in a geopolitical context that makes kind of cooperation a little harder and a bit more challenging than it used to be, it is important to kind of, build on structures like the ITU is offering. And we will continue to commit to really be a player in this, because we want to make sure that in this context of the digital transition that we all want, also to kind of to reap the benefits and to contribute to our competitiveness and our resilience in the future, we want to make sure that this digital transition remains anchored in, the values that we stand for and that we represent. And that, of course, also includes kind of our fundamental rights. Not everybody shares that. And so in the global context, it's important that kind of we also kind of stand for this approach when it comes to kind of, really defending also the freedoms and the values of democracy in this context. So that, things are not kind of weaponized. We see kind of, a new threat context around us. So we really have to redouble our efforts to kind of be strong in standing for a certain digital transition that is kind of building on our values. And here we see the ITU as an important partner, a forum where that kind of, debate can be held in the most constructive way. I see various areas, and you will delve into these kind of areas throughout the session today, where the ITU indeed kind of, plays a leading role and where we contribute in our kind of efforts with them. The one is standard setting. This is, of course, a key aspect when it comes to kind of making sure that we have systems in the futures and networks in the future that are interoperable. And here we can build on a rich kind of, set of things that have already been developed in the ITU, just to name the interoperable system and networks, the global numbering, the quality of the service communication, that we can access content and streaming and TV programs around the world. These kind of standards are important. They need to be cherished. They need to be developed further so that we really have the biggest global participation in this digital revolution. Of course, when looking ahead, some of these kind of potential standards that we will be looking at in the future are not, not sensitive. Because, of course, we have to kind of think about, issues such as facial recognition, how do we deal with that? For the European Union, it's important to take a certain stand on this, building on our kind of, value system on kind of, human rights. And so it's important that we kind of, have a joint, approach with the ITU on that. And I know also from my interactions with Doreen that she's also very strong on this point, and I'm very grateful for that. Another important area for the ITU has always been radio frequencies. And there, of course, this is a scarce resource. And here always the stakes are high. When looking back at the World Radio Communication Conference in 2023, it was a big kind of, discussion about, making kind of enough spectrum available for future connectivity needs, but also, protect the spectrum that we, for instance, in the European Union needed for systems such as Galileo and Copernicus, which are, of course, of great importance for, our economy, but also our citizens. When looking ahead at the World Radio Conference that is ahead of us in 2027, certainly, similar kind of issues will come on the table and will be even enriched by kind of, current big themes around, satellites, for instance, just to name one. The third kind of area that was already mentioned by Beatrice, where I think the ITU plays a very important role, is the context of development. This is a very timely, context to talk about that, because it's next week that the World Telecommunication Development Conference 2025 will open in Baku, Azerbaijan. And that will be an important moment to discuss and, to bridge divides, digital divides, to use ICT to actually promote economic and social coherence and development. So this is a lot about rural areas, which are not connected compared to the kind of the big cities. But it's also about, springing sustainability and economic development, and of course, ensuring equal opportunities for everybody, including also girls and women. So here, ICT technology can help to make a difference. We know that there is still a huge digital divide worldwide when you think about, the participation in kind of, the digital world. And here, I think that conference can make a big contribution to bring that issue further on the political radar, and maybe also develop more concepts how we can work on this together. We in the European Union have also made a plea to play a bigger role on the international digital kind of context. That's why we have issued before the summer a communication on our digital international strategy that will be echoed in the very near future by conclusions from the Council of Ministers who are fully behind us, because of course also that is a Team Europe approach. What is new in there is that we really want to kind of join forces with our partners to kind of build on the important, issues that are in our technological kind of development, and really build kind of, partnerships where both sides kind of benefit on that. We talk about an EU business offer, but it's really meant in kind of, doing it in a win-win context with the partners. We also have in the European Union committed funding to this kind of, global vision of our international digital policy. This is the Global Gateway, where we will also in the future engage much more on digital projects with, of course, partners around the globe. And that, of course, brings in important kind of, areas such as subsea cables, but of course also kind of, satellite broadband for rural areas. All these are kind of important aspects. And we always want to bring in also the dimension that we are learning the hard way at the moment, how important it is to have trustworthy and secure networks, because if you want to have sustainable networks, you need to make sure they are secure. Let me also just, because we are, speaking here from Brussels, and that's not too far from Ukraine, let me kind of stress the importance of the support that the ITU is also paying to Ukraine. We have witnessed that. This is about rebuilding, the telecommunication infrastructure there, and, to have an international partner with whom we can partner up in our, of course, strong support for Ukraine in the context of the war is very valuable. So as you can see, we have a lot of things to discuss. I simply wanted to set the scene, and I'm very happy that around me there are my two colleagues, Emilio Davila Gonzalez and Gerasimos Sovianatos, who have already been mentioned, who will kind of from the standards and from the spectrum side give you a much deeper kind of insight and the challenges. But for that, let me wish you very fruitful discussions and insights in this kind of day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Renata Nicolai, for this vision. And indeed, I will be, you mentioned Baku, and I will be traveling to Baku very soon. So it is one of a big appointment that we have ahead. And of course, I pass the floor now, also keeping this in mind, to Jaroslav Ponder, Director of the Europe's Office of the ITU, to deliver a bit their feeling, including on Baku, possibly. Thank you, Jaroslav. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Beatrice, and thank you, Renate, for the kind introduction. Good morning, everyone. It's good to be here with all of you and to discuss the ITU matters. Before starting, please let me convey regrets from our SG, Dorin Bogdan Martin, but due to the flight delay, she's still in the air and not able to connect. I will do my best to provide her messages, but also together with Valentina Stadnic as the Europe team at the ITU will stay during the whole event to be able to respond and add any kind of the information you will put in the chat box or during the meeting. As already mentioned, the ITU has been around for some 160 years. Nearly all 20 of our founding members come from Europe. Today's word is unrecognizable from that of 1865 when the ITU was founded. ITU went from 20 to 194 member states, and from standardizing wireless telegraphy to the telephone, to TV, from satellites, mobile and the internet to AI and quantum computing. But ITU's core mission, connecting the world meaningfully, has not changed. In fact, I would say it's more urgent now than ever. Europe continues to be a steadfast contributor to our mission on the order of 36% of all member states' contributions, amounting to about 43 million euro annually. In addition to engaging with 46 governments from the Europe region through their digital ministries, ICT regulators, cybersecurity agencies, or frequency management agencies, ITU also has members from the private sector, from startups to multinationals, as well as the academia membership category. 326 of those sector memberships come from Europe, and we would love to see more of them, given the excellence of the European digital sector. ITU members can join any of or all three core departments that we call sectors: radio, standards, and development, which were already mentioned earlier. But let me begin with the radio communication sector, ITU-R. And this part of the ITU coordinates global radio frequency spectrum and satellite orbits, supporting everything from satellite filings to coordinating frequencies to ensuring equitable access to spectrum and orbit resources. The technical groundwork for this happens in the ITU-R study groups, where the engineers, researchers, policymakers, and private sector experts think through technical challenges like spectrum sharing, more efficient propagation models, and more. ITU-R studies fit into what eventually becomes the radio regulations, the binding treaty that governs global radio frequency spectrum and satellite orbits and gets updated every 4 years by the World Radio Communication Conference. The next WRC set to take place in Shanghai in 2027 is around 80% related to space, with the agenda items including possible new allocations to the mobile satellite services for direct-to-device connectivity and the technical foundations to establish communication networks on the moon. We are currently in year 2 of the 4-year study cycle with the ITU-R study groups working hard on the ways to adjust spectrum allocations and orbital rules to match new technologies and realities on the Earth and in space. This flexibility helps the radio regulations evolve alongside a rapidly changing space environment, one that is no longer the domain of the governments alone, and one that is becoming increasingly crowded and contested in terms of spectrum. But by keeping the rules relevant and responsive, ITU helps make space more sustainable and secure from a regulatory perspective. And I know this is a priority for Europe and the European Space Agency as well. Of course, seamless communications rely on technical standards for reliability, efficiency, and interoperability. As today's other speakers, Emilio and Martin, know very well. That's where ITU-T, our standardization sector, comes in. ITU's history is as a standardization body goes back to our founding in 1865, as the world became increasingly interested in telegraphy applications. The following year, the 1866, the first successful transatlantic cables were completed. Today, ITU standards continue to support subsea cable resilience, and so much more, from broadcast radio to high-definition television to early warning systems that are becoming increasingly sophisticated and effective, and to even quantum information technologies. In ITU-T study groups and focus groups, we are working on AI standards for health, autonomous vehicles, greener data centers, smart cities, disaster response, and to deal with increasingly prevalent misinformation, disinformation, and deepfakes. Policy experts and researchers like you are crucial to the ITU's work. We need your help to test assumptions, identify potential gaps, and propose technical frameworks that are both rigorous and inclusive. A well-designed standard becomes part of the foundation for inclusive digital innovation by creating economies of scale, leveling the playing field, and building trust. And ITU's open and inclusive standards community is dedicated to ensuring new and emerging technologies ultimately serve the public interest. This brings us to the ITU-D, our development sector, where ITU helps countries design enabling policy and regulatory frameworks that protect consumers, promote innovation, attract investment, and build capacity so that all countries, regardless of their level of development, can benefit from digital. While more people are connected to the internet today than ever before, ITU-D also tracks these statistics, which tell us that right now, 5.6 billion people are online. We need to think about the quality of these connections and what makes connectivity meaningful and beneficial. Even if they are covered by a mobile signal, billions worldwide are still unable to participate fully in the digital economy because it's too expensive, inaccessible, or perceived as unsafe or irrelevant to them. We are visiting on the daily basis diverse developing countries. Also, as the ITU having the presence worldwide, we are on the ground. Where the connectivity can mean the difference between a child getting an education, between an expecting mother receiving urgent medical care, between a family reuniting and remaining separated after being forcibly displaced. But the reality is that 1.9 billion people, 1/4 of the global population, are still completely unconnected. That's why 3 years ago, ITU launched the Partner to Connect Digital Coalition, a platform to match digital needs with resources to connect underserved communities all over the world. At the beginning of this year, P2C recorded $54 billion in pledges. Today, I'm proud to share that we have crossed the $80 billion mark, And that's part thanks to the commitments from the European Union and the Commission, which is also a largest contributor to our digital development projects. Thank you very much for this. The European Commission has also contributed 30 million euro to the digital window of the joint SDG fund, for which ITUs leads the technical committee together with the NDP. So far, 13 countries have benefited from our collective support, with a further 10 having received seed funding for digital transformation. A word on digital sovereignty. An issue I know is top of the mind in Europe and many other regions, including Africa, as discussed at the Transform Africa Summit in Guinea yesterday. As countries strive to develop their digital capabilities, especially in AI, and look to protect their strategic interests, a secure leadership, it is crucial to ensure that no one is left behind in this global transformation. The question is not whether countries should build domestic capabilities in AI or other technologies, but how to pursue their digital ambitions while advancing responsible innovation, shared standards, and equitable access for all. Because for AI and for all digital technologies to truly benefit everyone, everywhere, our progress must be collective. This is the central focus of the World Telecommunication Development Conference, kicking off on Monday in Baku, Azerbaijan, as mentioned before. This conference will be held under the theme of universal, meaningful, affordable connectivity for an inclusive and sustainable digital future. With over 2,000 announced participants, almost 200 contributions, and over 150 VIPs being announced, will be shaping the future of the mandate of the development sector of the ITU and looking for the effective partnerships, including those with the European Commission, together with the Global Gateway and the partners to advance digital development. The work you do as the DigiConnect is fundamental to the future. So before closing, here is our invitation to you. Participate in an ITU study group in radio standards in development. Be part of the next set of standards, the next spectrum innovation, the next digital infrastructure financing model. Only together can we shape a digital future for Europe and for the world, where technology serves all of humanity. I hope you will join us on this occasion. And as I mentioned, we are staying with you during the whole duration of this webinar in order to provide any responses which can come up. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much to Jaroslav Konder for this perspective on the ITU important work ahead. I am checking on Slido to see if there's any questions from the audience at the moment. It doesn't seem to be the case, but I would have a very quick follow-up question for Renate and a quick one also for Jaroslav. Renate, you mentioned, the importance of digital transformation, of course, and the role it has in impacting society, citizens, the importance that we all participate in it. And so the question would be, what can we do from a Commission point of view to make sure that citizens participate even more, are aware of the importance, of digital, take awareness of what is the impact on everyday life, and also, and this is a bit an important theme because it's recurrent and it will be also in Baku, but we never fill the gap. What can we do to promote, participation from that you mentioned from girls and for women in the ICT world, which is still not optimal in this sense. And we know that algorithm is power. So if we don't participate in standard setting and in algorithm setting, we don't have much power in the future of the world. So that would be the question for Renate. Thanks.
Thank you, Beatrice. This is a big field. I think, let me kind of, maybe reply to it in this way. I think, there's a technological race happening at the moment because we are in the middle of a disruptive technological kind of, evolution. AI is a similarly important kind of, technological development as we have seen it in previous phases in humanity. So it will affect all of us. It will affect, all sectors. It will affect the way we learn, we work, we produce, we kind of, develop services. Here, of course, as a European Union, we have a real kind of chance to play our role in this, because this is about our future competitiveness. This is about our future resilience. So on the one hand, there is a really big focus, and rightly so, on ensuring that we have our digital sovereignty in this kind of context, so that we are not only kind of, takers of technology that others produce, but actually are also kind of involved in the making of it. But of course, on the other hand, this kind of, focus on the digital infrastructure that you need, whether it's cloud, whether it's connectivity, whether it's data, whether it's AI innovation, will only work if kind of you have a society that is ready for it. And here I just come from, the Digital Summit, where I gave an opening speech earlier this morning, and the Digital Skills Summit, where I gave a speech earlier this morning. And this just shows that, as much as we are trying to kind of, build our digital infrastructure, of course, also in a global kind of vision, as we just discussed together with the ITU, to leave nobody globally behind, but of course also from our, interests as an assertive Europe, we need to make sure that we have the people to be actually able to kind of lead and work with these technologies, and also a society that can deal with it. And here, I think we are on the road. We are having a certain compass. We have a digital decade policy program where we set ourselves, for instance, a target of achieving by 2030, 20 million ICT specialists. Well, I mean, we are halfway through the program, which we adopted 5 years ago. We are not good in terms of meeting that target. On the other hand, the good thing is that since we have kind of realized in a kind of a structure like the European Union, where we have demographic challenges anyway, we really need to invest more to ensure we have the digital skills in a society, but we also have the advanced digital skills for the future technologies. And that means, of course, cyber, that means AI, that means quantum, cloud, and you name it. And I think if you see the trajectory, and here the digital, skills summit was very interesting. We saw new data is that we are catching up. But this is a kind of a joint kind of effort that we need to kind of do also in cooperation with partners, because also there can be digital skills partnerships. For instance, with a partner like India, where we have a digital partnership, we are also thinking about, exchanging kind of digital skills. So this is not only a focus in the EU alone, but also in our international context. And here women, being half of the population, being not yet embedded enough in ICT, we really have to kind of catch up, because it's an economic necessity, and it would be stupid not to invest in that. And here, this is a kind of a work. So tomorrow, there will also be a Women in Digital kind of summit as a part of that Digital Skills Summit. And again, they will look at a new index, because we are understanding a bit better the root causes, why there aren't enough women in kind of the STEM fields, why if they are starting in the STEM fields, they're not staying in there, why their careers are not kind of advancing. So I think this is a conversation that we need to continue also, but I think the problems are recognized, and it's very clear. And there's a last point, because I also said you need a digitally savvy kind of society. That means we all need to make an effort to really also educate our society to kind of, of course, take the benefits from the digital transition, but also be savvy and deal with the kind of, the issues that might arise, These are issues such as disinformation, online manipulation. And here, whilst we have a regulatory framework, we also really need to continue to really invest and kind of make efforts in media literacy, so that we have digitally savvy societies that can benefit in the best way.
Thank you very much to Renate Nicolai for these insights. And in this light, also very quick question to Jaroslav Ponder. In the UN system, how do you ensure that this vision, from the ITU and from the importance of digital and connectivity is kind of permeates the other agencies, you know. So how do you ensure that we are all on the same page in the UN system?
Yes, thank you very much. So just few observations. Just referring to this, what Renata was mentioning about the importance of absorption of the technologies and the ability of using them meaningfully. The ITU, together with the member states and this membership, has developed the framework of the universal and meaningful connectivity, which in fact provided us the framework where we are able to not only talk about the technology itself, but also take a look how this technology can advance the development. And we're very happy that the previous strategic plan has incorporated also this as the one of the strategic goals, and we're tracking this progress. The reality is unfortunately such that for some of the information we are still need to make the progress. And you were talking about the digital skills. This is one of the areas where only around 100 governments, slightly below, above 100 governments, are collecting the information on digital skills. This means that it's not the national priority, or is priority but not elevated enough in order to understand that the human-focused technology development and promotion should be much more in the focus of the actions of the governments. So therefore, any kind of actions strengthening the capacities of the countries in the field of the digital skills development, capacity building, institutional, but human capacity building as well, is of the great value at this moment, also to harness the benefits of the emerging technologies, which are bringing the benefits, but also bringing a lot of fear, which we need to demystify and to make sure that there is the confidence in use of these technologies. On the other hand, of course, the ICTs, for the ICTs, ITU is very much proud to be the UN agency for the digital technologies, and already over 20 years back, we have brought the proposition to the UN system at the Plenipotentiary Conference in 1998 in Minneapolis. The member states agreed to request the UN system to bring the challenge of the digital divide and other digital connectivity divide and other divides to the attention of the global community. And as such, World Summit on the Information Society, the first ever multi-stakeholder process, has been born. Since then, we're accompanying this process, leading on the discussions, facilitating the implementation of the outcomes of the World Summit on the Information Society. We're very much pleased that the all community of the UN agencies are passionately contributing to this process, as the WSIS provided the better understanding on the mandates and the roles, responsibilities across the all UN system, making sure that not only one UN agency is working on those, but also the WHO, ILO, UNICEF, and other many other organizations are advancing the development in the field of the digital. And they are doing a lot of work. And this requires coordination in order to avoid the duplications across the board. In particular, once we are going to the country level implementation support to the countries, it's necessary that we have coordinated approach, and we are looking forward also to the 20 years review process of this World Summit on the Information Society, to make sure that it's not only providing the policies, but also the mechanisms to advance the development, and that indeed by the 2035 we can see even larger impact of the digital technologies on the human life. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jaroslav. And now let's deep dive into the sectors of work where things get really crispy. I leave the floor to Emilio Davila Gonzalez, who's head of the standardization sector in DigiConnect. Emilio, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Beatrice, and good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And I will try to explain. I have been involved with ITU for a number of years now, why ITU standardization is important and the relevance it has for the EU, our policies. It works. Okay. Here we are. Just a reminder where you can see the European Commission views on standardization activities. We have two main documents, the Annual Union Work Programme on Standardization. This is a formal document, Commission decision, which identifies annually all the strategic priorities in standardization in general. And in particular, looking at the standardization requests needed to have harmonized standards to provide presumption of conformity with our regulations, which are then directed to the European standardization organizations. Then we have also, for the ICT case, the rolling plan for ICT standardization, which is also annual, is a more informal document drafted together with an expert group of the multi-stakeholder platform on ICT standardization, and where you can find by policy areas all the different standardization needs to support our policies. So 5G, 6G, IoT, cloud edge, health, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, name them. And there it also includes a small landscape overview of who is doing that from the different standard development organizations. So it's quite useful. I recommend you to have a look at that. And of course, it includes all the ITU standardization activities. Let's go to the ITU standardization activities because this is our main goal today. So what they do, they develop all kinds of technical standards. Both Renate and in particular Jaroslav have explained about that for the interconnection and interoperability of ICT telecom technologies and services. Also important, these standards help to bridge the standardization gap in the world, and this is important to bring connectivity and digitization to developed countries, which then it means that we can be better connected with all the rest, and in particular European Union, so fully in line with our policies. And then, of course, the third important thing, ITU, being the international UN agency for standardization, they foster the cooperation between national, regional, and international standards bodies. And this is important because we need to ensure coherent. The resources of standardization experts are scarce, and we need to ensure that there is overlapping rather than competing in some actions. For instance, they have a memorandum of cooperation with the European Telecommunication Standardization Institute, and they develop even joint working items. This is the structure of ITUT. So you have on the top the governance bodies, the World Telecommunication Standardization Assembly. We define the main strategic lines every 4 years. Last year we had a lot of fun in Delhi discussing this. And then the TSAC, the Telecommunication Standardization Advisory Group, which in more regular basis ensure the coordination, this cross-sectoral matter, and what are the main scope of the different study groups. The technical committees, for historical reason, in the ITU are called study groups. This is where they made the standards that are called recommendations. And they are structured by different topics on working parties, by areas. And then the working items, they are different questions. And it's really important to be involved there. So in my case, I'm involved in the governance bodies, but colleagues don't hesitate to look into the study groups that are related to your different activities. We will come back to those later. But there are more possibilities because you have these study groups, which are the technical bodies developing standards. You have the focus group, which is open to all parties, not only members. And they discuss which new directions need to be taken in ICT standardization and for the ITU, in particular with new and emerging technologies. So this is, for instance, that we had a recently closed one on metaverse that was defining, looking what is needed to standardize, who is already doing that, what should ITU do. So it's important to be there. Then you have other groups, joint coordination activities to try to collaborate with the different bodies active, and a lot of workshops and symposia, like the AI for Goods, where they discuss all issues related to AI, for instance, every year in July in Geneva. How standards are done, because this is the main issue. So standards are basically contribute-based and based on cooperation between the different experts. This is an example brought by ETSI, but it applies also to all the standards development organizations. So you start identifying a standardization need and you ask to open a working item. In the ITU, there is a specificity to open a working item with just one country, which is a member state. You can have the working item open. And then there is discussion. People bring contributions. So normally, the best technical merit is the one that there, but decisions are taken of consensus. So if it's supported by many experts, then you have more possibilities that those experts say, okay, this is the best technology that could be included in the standard. There is a lot of discussion until the standard is stable, some validations, review, of course, the editorial check, and then at the end, after all the feedback, when the standard is able and there is consensus on it, then it's sent for approval and publication. Of course, this is basically consensus. There is transparency, openness in accordance with WTO principles. And then the standard is ready to implement. Having a standard, it doesn't mean that it's going to be used. Then there are different ways of implementing. The market says this is really a standard, and normally it's because the industry and the players are already being involved in this cycle, and then they decided to implement it. Or it can be used for public procurement. ITU standards are recognized in our regulation on standardization 1025/2012 as specifications that can be directly mentioned there. So they can be mentioned, and also in our regulation because it's official. So if standards are normally used in a voluntary basis. But so only if you include it and reference in the regulation, then they become mandatory. And for that, they of course need to comply with some characteristics. And it's important again to be involved. Why? Because you have to defend the values and interests of the European Union. So for instance, to ensure that they are not affecting fundamental rights. Like we had in the past a case where some Chinese partners came a standard on biometrics that was a little bit too intrusive for the EU values. Then people need to be mobilized and say, guys, this is not the way to do it. Let's do it in a way that is compliance. Or we have, for instance, something, again, from Chinese different experts supported by other countries, proposing a new concept of internet, which could be with centralized nodes. And it is of course not what we understand by the open accessible internet, which is being developed, by the way, in the IETF, the Internet Engineering Task Force. So again, you need to be there and mobilize and explain to them, okay, this may not be the scope of ITU. Let's focus on the main scope and let's do it in whatever it is. And also to promote your standards. We will give an example later on standards for smart cities and communities that were coming from a European research, and then they're brought to ITU to have an international standards that could provide for interoperability of smart cities and communities application. So again, Jaroslav was mentioning that. I joined him, encouraged to participate in this standardization process. Who can participate? Who are the members? The ITU members are the member states, so representative of all 194 UN member states, and they are the only ones that can participate and vote in the governance issues, for instance. So in the governance issues, I told you, we, European Union, we are recognized as international organizations with the same rights that sector members, like industry and academia, that participate. But that means that we can also participate, we can voice in the governance, but we cannot vote. But in the different study groups, in the technical committees, we can make technical contributions, we can participate, and we are part of the consensus driving. So there, we have the same rights. I have participated in some technical committees, ensuring, for instance, that the standards for blockchain were aligned with the specifications that we are producing for the European blockchain standardization infrastructure. There is no problem. On the contrary, it's recognized because this means that the standard can be implemented without problem in the EU. Then there are some associated, academia can there, and of course invited experts in case-by-case basis. But main message, we are sector members, we can participate, don't hesitate. And then, what are these technical committees, study groups? You have here the list. And again, you will see that they are really relevant, the work that they are doing for our regulation. So you look at the study group 2 on operational aspects, they are looking at all numbering, emergency services, network resilience. So this is important for our regulatory activities and the promotion of connectivity. Study group 3, economic and policy issues. Well, no need to say that it's important because we are running the telecom policy in the EU. And they are discussing things like tariffs, like fair sharing. So there, think about the DNA. That be SG5, environmental, circular economy, important for the twin transition. And there, for instance, they are making all the metrics for the environmental footprint of ICT services and devices. We used to have a convener there looking into these issues. Protocol testings, combating counterfeitings, stolen things is important. Quality of services and performance of the networks, all the future networks, the confluence between mobile and fixed network, these are done in SG13, the transport, access and home, security, this is really important. They are also dealing with identity management, for instance, developing the public key infrastructures and all the issues related to cybersecurity. They have good cooperation with activities made in Senelec and also in ETSI, for instance, here, but we need to be involved there and ensuring that it's in line with our cybersecurity policies and regulations. SG20, we will see later, Internet of Things, all kind of things about smart cities, including city bears, but also digital health, connected vehicles, a lot of things in this study group. And the new study group 21 on multimedia and contact cable, they are also, for instance, looking at virtual worlds metaverse. So it's important to be there. This is a newly created, they have new actions. So again, encourage the participation in all things. We can, as a Commission services, participate in this study group. In Connect, we are coordinating the participation of colleagues, but also encourage the participation of our stakeholders, industry, cooperating with member states, have a coordinated approach. We are doing it actually now, and also that the industry from our member states are involved in these activities. In the slides, you will find more information, background information about these study groups. And I want to conclude giving some figures from 2024. So you see the numbers of the different participation in the different plenary meeting. So they are not bad, but you compare with other countries, and in particular, for instance, China has seen the geostrategical importance, and they are including the different study group with experts proposing their standards as basis for the ITU standards. So it's important to contribute there. And it's also important to bring our technologies and our contribution directly into the study groups. So again, it's not bad, but it can be better. And we have to ensure that in particular in those strategic areas, we are there. And this is all from my side. Thank you. I'm open for questions as well. And
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So I have told to you about this study group 20, and we have, and this is important because I can tell you from my perspective, but we have with us a colleague, Martin Brinskov from OpenRGI's Smart Cities Initiative, which will explain his experience with this study group 20, bringing the results of the European research, of the European Living Labs into the ITU standardization. So Martin, please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emilio. So are you hearing me well? Are you seeing me? Are you seeing the slides?
Yes, we are. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you so much for the invitation to this distinguished and timely conversation. So yes, indeed, I would be a bit more practical. I will also dump a lot of information since this is recorded. So I hope that we can really exemplify how the work on the European global region really interacts practically and decisively, and I would say ambitiously, with the UN system, and particular in this case in study group 20 of the ITU team. So the point is that we are indeed, as we heard in the opening, facing really not just big changes, but also grand challenges in the virtualization of our lives, our economy, and so on. And of course, this is a global concern, so the UN system should, of course, be involved. Now, on the other hand, this takes place data centers use water, they also consume resource, and our economies, our social fabric are really impacted locally. This is our perspective. I'll show you a little bit in practice how it is being approached also from the standardization world. So my name is Martin Brunskov, and I'm involved both in the Standard Group 20 on the ISO level, the CEN European level, and in Denmark, where I am convener of the Mirror Committee for many of these things, and I'm at the University of Copenhagen. So just where we come from. So this last week, I was very consumed by leading the launch of the European AI and Science Summit, the inaugural flagship for AI and science. But of course, related to these conversations very quickly are how can we do things in common without doing everything in common. So that's not just a European discussion with 27 member states, but that's a global discussion. So very, very nice opportunity and a show that we can convene really both investors, policymakers, industry, and the research community. So I have been working in this field of let's say, when virtualization takes place, space-based computing, since decades, written about it, and I was the co-founding chair of Open Agile Smart Cities and Communities, which is a global organization, an association based in Brussels, and incidentally has 193, so one less member than the ITU, spreading the globe, but centered currently in Europe. And the focus here really is to bring the vision from the ground to the bigger wheels. And of course, there's technological development, but at some point we need to agree, the policies need to gel on a higher level. So we, of course, see very different approaches in the different global regions, and even locally within a small country like my home country, Denmark, there can be vast differences from municipality to municipality. So of course, there's a reason why we have 500,000 local governments in the world. They're not just technocrats. They're actually expressing different views on the world. And that's an important point, which I think the ITU and the standardization organizations sometimes really eminently grasp. But in the technology world, that view of diversity has, let's say, a shorter history. So, of course, built on the policies we heard about, this decade program, this is all about, and this goes for everyone, about legitimate agency. It's not enough to have agency, lots of money and lots of power in that sense, political power as well. You also need legitimacy from your constituency and, for the things you do. And this goes for any government at any level, of course, because you want to be able to provide protection and innovation. And that's whether it's, the electrical system or it's the digital systems. This goes together. You cannot just provide one. And of course, we have seen now in Europe how the move from directives, which have to be implemented in 27 different ways, are now moving in some instances in the key digital domains towards acts, so EU laws that are immediately effective in all member states, but then they need to be supported by something on the technical level, and here the answer is very often standards. The question is then, how does that happen? In my domain, which is, let's say, smart, sustainable cities and communities, it is really, there's been so many approaches, and we have put these together, and they have been practically specified in some specifications that I'll showcase here. We all know that there's the global system of standardization development. There's the WTO system, which is the one we're discussing now on the EU level, of course, mirroring the global level, and that is again mirrored in different ways nationally. And then we have, you could say, the rest, the de facto standards. And what I want to show is how we go from, let's say, a local and a national vision this is the Danish example of a guide for businesses and governments and others, what actually to do. So of course, focus on data and have some kind of minimal common ground. And that was very nicely reflected in the report with guidance that came out with support of 19 UN agencies. So very, very nice example of how the local level is then captured on the global level, of course, with a global perspective. And one of the key points here is this notion of minimal interoperability and the MIMS, which is depicted here. And the point is that we will never have, complete and fully harmonized systems globally and even locally, but we need a minimal level. We know this from so many other places, like in spectrum, in the ID name domain range. So this is the idea that we have, let's say, over time developed both for procurement, for working, exchanging, and for building systems worldwide. And how do you structure such an idea, a MIM, globally? Well, it's natural you use the fora that are set up to do this. So now the Y.4505 specification recommendation is the global standard for this coming out of the Study Group 20. And there's a whole framework now being developed based on this, addressing the challenges that we see when virtualization has to take place through procurement and so on, as we talked about. So some practical examples, of course, in Europe, data spaces is a very prominent initiative to ensure that access and management of data is handled from the lowest level up until the, let's say, the global regional level. But of course, it goes beyond because the world is bigger than Europe. There's local digital twins, so the models that are built on top of this. We've published on this, including the standardization contributions and vision in this book. And of course, the purpose is always to take better decisions for our lives collectively and in various communities. Then on top, when you have these, let's say, infrastructures, you need to engage, and this is the cityverse. And it was interesting that you mentioned, so Study Group 21 is responsible for the metaverse. Yes, but the metaverse for the ground, which is where we all live, the metaverse for smart sustainable cities and communities, that's in fact Study Group 20 that's leading on that one. So very interesting practical implications for these digital infrastructures. And we now see how this agenda is evolving with all the stakeholders that we have touched upon here. Just to give you some images, this is from the city of Rotterdam, and really, really many local governments are trying to grok how to handle this. And ideally, this should be a little bit like Lego bricks. But then again, back to the data spaces, this is what it looks like in policy terms. The challenge is, of course, that we need something that works globally, but can be implemented locally and respects the governance levels that must be observed. There are many practical gatherings for sometimes institutions, just to mention also some of the global piloting that's going on, in this case, Indico, which is a very nice example of the collaboration between the UN system and the European funding system. But in order to give you, and this of course is just an image that you can see, this is no coincidence that we now have a global standard that comes from European efforts and also actually aligns with the policies that we see in the Digital Decade policy program, because we do have Data Act, Data Governance Act, Interoperable Europe Act, and so on. But we also see, well, some see how these different very practical validation efforts with hundreds and hundreds of stakeholders around Europe, but also globally, have validated these ideas. So we don't jump directly from policy to standards, because the worst thing about standards is not if you don't have them. The worst thing is if you implement standards that doesn't work or doesn't achieve what you want as a community, as a society, well, as the world. So very, very concrete linking between the practicalities, the legislation, the policies, and the implementation mechanisms and the governance of this. of course, happy to answer any details here, but bringing these people into the same room to even discuss, well, that's quite a challenge. Very concretely, in Valencia, also last week, we had the Global Initiative on Virtual Worlds and AI around the Cityverse launch. Brilliant example of what I just showed about European and global collaboration. And now the next part is, of course, to feed back into the MIMS world and have a particular minimal interoperability mechanism for the interoperable Cityverse, so that you can do things differently across the globe, supported by the policies of your liking. So in this case, in Europe, the European policies, but also to deliver value. And I think that is the main purpose we're all here for. So it's very easy to get involved, as you also showed, Emilio, on the global level, ITU, of course, but also the joint work that's done with ISO and IC and ITU on the EU level and so on. And you can get involved as expert, you can get involved in the validation through the piloting and so on. And you can also, well, start by reading the reports, but very happy to follow up. And thank you so much for the time and invitation.
Thank you very much to Martin Brinskov for this overview, and especially, making us understand how all this very technical, detailed work on standards then has really a meaning on our daily life, and in particular on cities. If we consider that over 4 billion of the world population today lives in cities, and it's going to be, is a number projected to become bigger in the future. We do understand that smart cities is really, part of our sustainable future, and all the work we do there is really relevant. Now, I would, given the short time that we have, I would suggest that we go to the next session, and then if we still have a few minutes, we leave the question and answers for the end. So I would invite to take the floor Erasmus Sofianatos. We will look into the work that we do on radio spectrum. This work is very close to my heart because I started 25 years ago at DigiConnect in the mobile and satellite communications unit. And I'm saying this for those who listen from outside the Brussels bubble, because at the time, 25 years ago, we didn't even have a EU spectrum policy. And now Erasmus is the head of a spectrum unit. We are in a completely different place. So Erasmus, please, the floor is yours. Drive us through the challenges of radio communications and spectrum in the ITU context. Thank you.
Yes, good morning. Thank you very much, Beatrice. I don't know if my presentation is visible because I think I have, it's not, I think. Wait a moment. Yeah, I'm doing this, but unfortunately it doesn't pass. The glitch here. We're having a problem connecting to the sharing service, it says.
Any technical help available there?
Yes.
We're working on it. This is why we need a standard.
Indeed. Let's try again. Can't share content.
Let's see the technical problems with the presentation of
It arrives.
Erasmus.
Unfortunately.
If not, Erasmus, I would suggest that you take us
Send
through
it
and
to
then
Emilio,
maybe we share
maybe.
the slides.
Just a moment, I'm sharing. I'm sending this to Emilio. And then he can put it online for me. Okay, in the meantime, maybe just to present myself. My name is Gerasimos Sofianatos, and I'm the head of unit of the Radio Spectrum Policy Unit. It's a unit which has a very broad portfolio, and amongst others, it deals with the WRC, the preparation for the Commission of the World Radio Communications Conference, and participates in this. So I have prepared today, I mean, it's been long since I have not given a lecture to a university, and it's my first time at the Connect University, but I used to work at the university before the Commission, so I'm very happy to be able to be present today for the Connect University. How's it going, Emilio? Does it pass? Yeah. Yes, super, perfect. So if you go to the first slide, you will see that what I intend to present today, which is an introduction to radio spectrum, for those who do not know what is radio spectrum, and then a bit what is the role of ITU and ITUR in radio spectrum management, present the WRC cycle and process, thank you very much, then the ECCPT workshop, which is taking place today, and our process to develop a council decision on a WRC 27. So as regards the what is radio spectrum, we hear a lot about what is radio spectrum, but it's when we are using it, it's everywhere, it's around us. But what it really is and how does it work? So electromagnetic spectrum, first of all, is covers all types of electromagnetic radiation, from very low frequency radio waves to very high frequency gamma rays. But radio spectrum is just one piece of that. It covers frequencies roughly from 3 kilohertz to 300 gigahertz. It's what is it, however? It's so important because it's an invisible highway for the wireless signals to travel. So everything that works wirelessly, from radio, TV, mobile phones, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, GPS, opening your car in the morning or your garage door, everything relies on spectrum. But spectrum, as you have seen, as I have said before, it's not endless. It's a finite resource. Only certain frequencies are usable, and there is where the problem starts. But I will come to this later. So how does information travel in radio spectrum? It travels thanks to modulation. Modulation is a process of varying the property of a carrier wave, like a radio wave, to carry the information. The information could be voice, could be data, could be music, from one place to the other. By modulating the information, we imprint the information onto the wave, so it can be transmitted over the air and later recovered, which we call demodulation, by a receiver. So you see in the graph that I have in the slide, different types of modulation. The amplitude modulation, where you vary the amplitude, the height of the radio wave, it's used in AM radio. It's simple, but it's more sensitive to noise. Frequency modulation, known from FM radio, where you vary the frequency, the spacing between the waves. And of course, phase modulation, where you vary the phase, the timing shift of the wave, and it's used in digital communication systems. Let's say disclaimer here: I'm not an engineer, neither physics. I have a legal background, so this is let's say things that I have learned working very much closely with engineers. Now, what does ITU has to do with this? Why does this concern ITU? So we heard from the previous speaker what is ITU, a United Nations agency responsible for standards, but also of managing how radio spectrum and satellite orbits are used. And most importantly, this job is done by the ITU radio communication sector, ITUR, as was very nicely explained by Jaroslav. So why do we need an international body to look into radio frequency. That's because frequency does not stop at the border like other objects. It transgresses the border, and hence we need to ensure that, first of all, there is no harmful interference, which means there is no disruption or unwanted disturbance that affects the radio signals when multiple devices are using the same frequency or nearby frequencies, but also that all countries have some access to this finite resource, which is radio spectrum, and they can use it for their own development. And lastly, we need an international organization to look into radio spectrum to ensure that we have global communication systems which can move seamlessly around the globe. Like, for instance, we have frequencies for aviation, for planes that travel from one place to the other, navigation, but also satellite communications, mobile networks, so that we can use our phones all over the world. So how is ITU organized, and how we can do this this work, and what is the work that is doing? First of all, in order to prevent radio frequency interference, there are many ways to do it. Technical ways like applying filters or frequency hopping technologies, but the main way of tackling interference is by frequency coordinations, by assigning different bands to different users and by following and respecting regulatory limits about the power of the emission. So how is this done in practice? First of all, the globe is partitioned in three main regions. Region 1 is the region where we are today, which includes Europe, Africa, and a big part of the Russian Federation. Region 2 includes the Americas, and Region 3 includes Australia, China, India, and Southeast Asia. So all these, in each one of these regions, the ITU decides how frequencies will be used. We will be coordinated in a way that there is no harmful interference between countries, and that all countries can have access to radio frequencies. So how do the radio regulations, the ITU radio regulations look like? For instance, I have put on the slide an example for the 3.4, 3.6 gigahertz band, which is one of the pioneer bands, we call them, for 5G. Most of your, when you have a very good 5G signal on your phone with a very good quality of download and upload, you are most likely on a 3.4, 3.6 gigahertz band. So you see, for instance, that in region 1, this band is allocated for fixed service, fixed satellite service, and mobile service, but also for radio location. The allocation in region 2 is different, and then the band, the band is segmented in two parts: 3.4, 3.5, 3.5, 3.6. The same in region 3. So there is the radio regulations define how the band should be used in each of the regions. And we have also the footnotes, we call, to the radio regulations, which are exceptions or explanations of different uses. For instance, they explain if a mobile use is a general mobile use, or it is for a specific purpose. And it was said also by the previous speakers, the radio regulations are updated every 3 to 4 years, and this is done in the ITU World Radio Communications Conferences. So these are radio communications conferences which gather more than 3,000 delegates from all UN members. They are not political in nature. There are no national speeches or high-level presence. They are technical. They take place every 4, sometimes 3 years. And it was said also from Yaroslav that the next one will be in Shanghai. So in the WRCs, we negotiate to update the radio regulations, which is the international treaty. But why? Why do we need to do this? First of all, in order to have a stable and predictable regulatory environment, but to enable new radio communication systems to access radio spectrum. 10, 20, 30 years ago, there was no mobile telephony, there was no 5G, but also to protect the incumbent radio communication services from interference. In the preparation of the WRCs, it is important, the role of the regional groups is very important. And there are 6 regional groups which do not overlap with the 3 regions, but and sometimes some countries are members in more than one regional group. For I have put on the slide with the graphs, the emblems of those 6 regional groups. For region 1 for Europe, it is the European Conference of Postal and Telecommunications Administrations, CEPT. The acronym comes from the French language. But you have the Asia Pacific Telecommunity for the Pacific, the Arab Spectrum Management Group, the African Telecommunications Union, Inter-American in the Americas, and the Regional Commonwealth in the field of communications, which is mainly neighboring countries of the Russian Federation. So the CEPT, which is the group in which the all 27 member states are part, is the European regional organization, and except from the 27 EU member states, it also has other countries members, all which are in the European continent. So in order to prepare the World Radio Communication Conference, the CEPT has a group, a conference preparatory group, which, sorry, I have not moved to the slides, sorry, yeah, I was wrong. So this is the regions that I should have been showing you, and the how the radio regulations look like. Okay, good. So you see here on the regions, region 1 Europe, region 2 Americas, and region 3 Australia, the radio communications. I said that in region 1 we have 1 allocation for the 3.4, whereas in region 2 and 3 it is split. WRC with the number of the delegates, and the next one in Shanghai. I think here I already explained what are the objectives of changing the radio regulations, and I was on the regional groups. So the conference preparatory group for the CEPT is the one that prepares the WRC, prepares the briefs, and and the position of the CEPT is agreed by consensus at each phase. So in order to adopt them, you need to have to adopt a common proposal coming from the CEPT. It needs to be backed by at least 10 member states and not opposed by 6 countries in total. No, this slide, it's a bit complicated, of course, but it shows a bit how we are, how we operate for the WRC. It's good that Emilio reminded me that I was not showing your slide, because imagine how could I present to you and explain to you this slide without you seeing it. It would have been impossible. But so, I mean, what to retain from this slide? First of all, that you have, on the one hand, the ITU member states which participate in the WRC, and you also have the ITUR study groups, which are the same, let's say, the same institution as the one that Emilio presented, so I don't need to explain it again, where the work and the studies are being carried out. And then you have the different conference preparatory groups that are feeding in common positions to the discussion. There is the director of the Radio Communications Bureau, which also plays a role. And then there is the negotiation that takes place in order to update the radio regulations. On the right side of the slide, you can see, for instance, at the moment for the next WRC 27, how the different agenda points are distributed between the different groups of the CPG, PTA, PTB, PTC, and PT1. So those groups are discussing regularly, and they are developing the common European position on the subject. The agenda for each WRC meeting is agreed at the previous WRC meeting, and the meetings have to start immediately after the completion of each WRC to have sufficient time to develop the common positions. Now, why is it important to the role of the 6 regional organizations? Because the proposals that come from the 6 regional groups have a special status. Why? Because from the way they are developed with on the basis of consensus and broad support by countries, they are distributed immediately. So they are considered that they are backed by a sufficient number of member states, and they are given, let's say, more importance and prominence in the negotiations. The Commission attends the meetings of CPGs and the project teams, which is a lot of workload, in particular for our unit. So how are we preparing for WRC 27? So it was said by the previous speakers that the EU is an ITU sector member, which means that we do not have neither a speaking right nor voting right. At the same time, it's the member states that negotiate also in the name of the Union. But how is this done? This is done on the basis of a Council decision based on Article 218, paragraph 9 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, where the position of the Union on items of EU relevance, what does this mean? These are items which are affecting EU law, EU policies or programs, is taken. So the Commission is how in practice is being done. First of all, the Commission has a high-level expert working group, the Radio Spectrum Policy Group, RSPG, which assists the Commission in the preparatory work and develops an interim opinion by, first of all, identifying which WRC agenda items are of EU relevance, which means that they are relevant for EU law, affecting EU law, policies or programs. Then they develop an opinion on those points, and they deliver to the Commission recommendations as regards the EU position. Then the Commission uses this opinion to develop a draft decision, a draft Council decision, and submits this decision to the Council for discussion. And once this decision is adopted by the Council, it is binding on the member states, which means that they should pick in the WRC within the limits of this decision. You can see in the timeline that we are today in the 4th quarter of 2025, where we are at the point where we are developing the final RSPG opinion, and which is supposed to be delivered in the mid of next year. And this will be the basis for us to develop the Council decision, which should normally be adopted before sufficiently in advance of the WRC to be in place. Of course, in this process, we are trying to involve as much as possible all stakeholders who have interest from the decisions that are taken at the WRC. And this we do inter alia through a workshop, a joint EC European Commission CEPT workshop on WRC 27, which incidentally takes place today at this very time at the nearby conference centers. And it's also, of course, online. On the agenda of today's meeting, there are 7 sessions which cover the process and all the relevant agenda items, including the agenda of the next WRC 31. So today we will cover inter alia, fixed, mobile and broadcasting satellite services, direct-to-device satellite connectivity, which was also mentioned before, but also mobile services. So at each of these sessions, there will be a presentation of the EU policy background and the status of the discussions at CPG. And at 4 sessions, the stakeholders' views will be presented and they will take the floor. So this concludes what I wanted to explain to say today, and I'm very happy to take questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gerasimos Sofianatos, head of the Spectrum Radio Spectrum Unit Policy, Radio Spectrum Policy Unit of DigiConnect. We have already one question on Sligo from Elise, who asked, does satellite internet fall under the same rules, the rules of access to all countries? Maybe you can already provide a reply. Yes.
The rule is that, as I said before, the reason why we have radio regulation is to ensure that all countries have access to radio frequencies. Then those radio frequencies are assigned to operators, commercial operators, to provide electronic communication services. Hence, after the allocation is the definition that one band should be used for one service so that there is no interference to another service. For instance, band X is used for broadcasting, whereas band Y is used for mobile. After, of course, this, each country should authorize within its territory an operator to use a specific portion of this spectrum to provide a service. This happens for terrestrial spectrum, as we say, for mobile, for instance, mobile communications or digital terrestrial television. So here in Belgium, for instance, the Belgian relevant competent authority has assigned spectrum to 3 to 4 mobile operators, so each one provides mobile service. Whereas in nearby France, the frequencies have been assigned to 4 different mobile operators. Now, in space, of course, in satellite, the situation is similar, but not exactly the same, because, of course, as we understand, satellite networks do not stop at the border and have a broader coverage than terrestrial networks have. There, again, the frequency is let's say, assigned at a national level, but before this, there is a process of the authorization of the satellite with the filing, as we call, of the satellite. Each satellite needs to have an orbit, but again, as I said before, the satellite frequency, the use of the satellite frequency in each country needs to be authorized. Now, there are many ways of authorizing, and when we say authorizing in spectrum management, we don't always mean that there is a license, which means an individual right granted to an operator to use this frequency. For some frequencies, which can be used by many operators, can be shared, as we say, there is an authorization method we call the general authorization, where the competent authority sets in advance the conditions for the use of the spectrum and says, okay, if you respect those conditions, you can use the spectrum. This, for instance, happens for the key to open your car does not use licensed spectrum, uses unlicensed spectrum. The same happens also for satellite spectrum. There are devices, mainly we call them the kind of Internet of Things devices, which do not need to be authorized individually. I hope I have replied to your question.
Thank you very much, Erasmus. This was the reply to the question put on Slido by Elise. I have been checking, but it don't seem to be other questions coming up. I give it a couple of seconds more. But since we are already over time, if there are no urgent or pressing questions from our audience, I would suggest that we put this session to a close. Of course, I remind everybody who is still listening, you know, or those who will also watch the video afterwards, this has been recorded, that they can reach out to us, so they can also put questions in writing by sending emails to myself, to my colleagues, I mean, in the European Commission, to the ITU, of course. I would like to also remind us of the three main ITU global appointments ahead. So it was mentioned during this session already, the World Telecommunication Development Conference that will kick off next week in Baku, Azerbaijan. I will be there for DG Connect. There will be other colleagues joining from other services and from a Geneva delegation. Then in 2026, we will have the Plenipotentiary Conference, which is for the renewal of top positions in the ITU leadership. So this is also a very important appointment. And then, as we heard in the Spectrum session, we will have in 2027 in Shanghai the World Radio Communication Conference, and this will be on the next challenges for spectrum policy. So these are the, you know, we can see 25, 26, 27, a very dense agenda and calendar of ITU conferences, which will be crucially shaping the future of our communications and also, of course, of our cooperation. So the Commission will be there. I look at also Jaroslav Ponder and the ITU colleagues. I thank them for being here, staying with us all the time during this session. We look forward to the next appointments of the Connect University, and I give a big thanks to our speakers again, and also to the colleagues who made this possible from a logistical and organizational point of view. So see you soon, and keep in mind that technical issues are indeed issues very close to our daily life and very important for every citizen. Thank you for the participation.
Thank you so much.
From Brussels to Brasilia, from San Francisco to Tokyo, the European Commission is shaping the digital future, not just at home, but across the globe. Join us as we navigate the digital diplomacy of tomorrow, because everything we do is part of something bigger.